Hi, I'm Mandy Medley. I'm one of the worker owners here at Pilsen Community Books, and I'm so excited to welcome you here tonight for bilingual and Latinx literature in celebration of this wonderful book, The Animal Days, which has been on our front table for quite some time if you've stopped by the store. A couple of notes about how this evening will go. First, I'll introduce tonight's guests, and then I'll turn it over to Otto for the conversation. There will be time for questions at the end of the event, so if you have any questions at all during the event, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll make sure they get to the right place at the right time. If the internet does go out, which does happen sometimes here, just sit tight at this link, and we'll resume streaming as soon as possible. And then also, I would be a terrible bookseller if I did not mention that you could purchase The Animal Days either in person at our store or on our website at pilsencommunitybooks.com. And they really did a beautiful job with this one. I highly recommend you pick it up. And so now, without further ado, I will introduce tonight's guests. Antonio Díaz Oliva is the author of the nonfiction book Piedra Roja, El Mito del Woodstock Chileno, the novel La Soga de los Muertos, the short story collections La Experiencia Formativa, La Experiencia Deformativa, and Las Experiencias. He is also the editor of the anthologies 2040 and Estados Hispanos de América, Nueva Narrativa Latinoamericana, Made in USA. He received the Roberto Bolaño Young Writers Award, the National Book Award by the National Book Council of Chile, and he was a finalist for the Michael Jacobs Travel Writing Award by the Gabriel Garcia Marquez New Journalism Foundation. His journalism and essays have been published in Que Pasa, Rolling Stone, Gato Pardo, Letras Libre, and El Malpensante. He has been awarded fellowships from New York University, the Foundation for New Ibero-American Journalism, a Fulbright, and the Council for Culture and Arts in Chile. He has worked as a journalist, translator, ghostwriter, interpreter, and university professor in Bogota, Santiago de Chile, Washington, D.C., East Nashville, and New York. He currently lives in Chicago, which we're very, very happy about. And Forthcoming is campus to be published by Chatos Inhumanos, a bilingual publishing house in New York. Robin Myers is a Mexico City-based translator and poet. Recent and forthcoming translations include Salt Crystals by Christina Bendeck, Copy by Dolores Durantes, Another Life by Daniel Lapara, The Science of Departures by Adelbar Salas Hernandez, The Animal Days by Keila Vall de la Ville, Cars on Fire by Monica Raymond Rios, and The Restless Dead by Cristina Rivera Garza, and Animals at the End of the World by Gloria Susana Escoval. And you can find many of those on our shelves here, some of our favorites. She writes a monthly column on translation for Palette Poetry. And finally, Keila Vall de la Ville is a New York-based Venezuelan author, mother, and rock climber. Her novel, Los Días Animales, which we're celebrating here tonight, received the 2018 International Latino Book Awards and was translated into English as The Animal Days in 2021 by Katakana Editores. She is also the author of several short story collections, including Ana no duerme, a finalist for the Best Fiction Award and National Short Story Awards, Monte Ville Editores, Venezuela. She has published the poetry book Viaje, legado, and edited the bilingual anthology Between the Breath and the Abyss, Poetics on Beauty, a compilation of essays and poems by the 33 contemporary poets. She studied anthropology and political science in Venezuela and has an MFA in creative writing from New York University and an MA in Hispanic Cultural Studies from Columbia University. And now I'm sure we're all very happy, so that I can turn it over to Otto without any further ado.
All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here with Keila, Robin, and to be here, hosted by this wonderful bookstore in Chicago. If you ever are in town, please visit and get some books. We're here to celebrate this book, The Animal Days by Keila, wonderfully translated by Robin here. And this is a novel about many things. One of them is rock climbing. And that's something that interests me a lot. I think Latin American literature is a little lazy. So when I read this book, I was like, this is great. This is different from Latin America, because a lot of Latin American writers, they don't leave the couch. I'm gonna start with that. Okay, and this book is the opposite of that. But this book is about, in a way, what makes us humans, and also what makes us animals. And in a way, maybe there is not such a difference, and the book plays around with those two ideas, humanness and being an animal too. And when I was reading this translation, I thought about an interview I did like 6 years ago, I think, a conversation I had with the late writer James Salter from the US, and he has a novel called Solo Faces. Salter also was a climber, and he was a writer. So reading Keila's book, I was really interested about that connection. And in fact, I have here the interview I did with James Salter, and I asked him about the similarities between writing and climbing. And I'm gonna read you right now to start something he said. Climbing, James Salter said, gives you a different sense of scale, of the physical world, of distances and time, of accessibility, of certain quote unquote useless things like heaven and the skies. These things exist for everybody, but in a different way as when you are climbing. So that's something that really resonated with me, and I think I can put Keila's book within that group of books, books in which people climb, and also books in which people are looking for something that makes them feel adrenaline and makes them doubt about what makes us human. And I wanted to start with that. I want to start with Keila talking to us about climbing, because also here in the book, and as Mandy said, rock climbing has been part of her life for 25 years. She won a silver medal at the Pan American Climbing Championship in 1996. So, Keila, what's the story? I mean, what's your story with climbing? And after that, I'm going to ask you the same that I asked James Salter. What is the similarity for you between writing and climbing?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you. We're so happy to be here. We're super excited, and I'm very, very happy to share this one with you, Ado and Robin. So I started climbing when I was at the university studying anthropology. And my concern or my interest when I was studying was anthropology of landscape. I had never been a sports person. Actually, I come from a family of couch people, intellectuals that don't go much, don't go out much. And I had these friends who always told me, like, you should come, you're gonna like it. And I always said, like, yeah, one day I'll go. And of course I wouldn't, like, I wasn't going to go. One day I kind of couldn't delay the experience anymore. And I ended up going. And to me, it like literally love at first sight. I went once and I couldn't not go the next day and the following day and the following day. And I believe that what happened was that I discovered this activity that for me was never a sport. It was more of an exploration of myself, and caught me for completely unguarded. Like I never expected that. Rock climbing, of course, requires strength and there is this, I'm tempted to say myth about the extreme experience, but it's not a myth, it's a reality, but it wasn't the point to me. I started climbing and I never left for all those years because I found that it was a form of a way of being quiet. When you are climbing, there is nothing else. Not only people usually don't talk much. It's usually a very quiet environment. When people are climbing, you don't talk much. You don't want people to get distracted or anything. But also with yourself, like you need to be very aware of your surroundings and little details, like where do you press with your not only your feet, but this particular toe, the big toe, or the what do you do with the outer edge of your foot? Like these little details make a whole world of a difference. And that little by little, as I started climbing more and more, I realized that it was a way of meditation. Actually, it was a way of meditation because you had to be like so focused on the on those details and at the same time on nothing, because those details are so little that it's nothing. It's like, and time passes like this, and at least for me, it was like I was here down on Earth, and suddenly I was like somewhere else, and I didn't even know how I got wherever I got. So you could tell that there is like this kind of a disattachment experience, an experience of disattachment from the physical, even if you need the physical body so you can climb. So that connection to me was astonishing, literally astonishing. And that's what made me think that I needed to share, part of the experience in the novel, like not as the sport, but as the way of understanding your surroundings and the way you insert in the world in a way. So, and I guess that would take me to what's the similarity between writing and climbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in the end, like writing to me is pretty much the same thing. It's not a meditation though, not at all. It's pretty active. It's funny when I write. When you write, you're seated. Actually, you're not moving. You would think that that's the meditation, but no. When I'm writing, I'm like my mind is all over, as everybody's. I mean, when you write, you're connecting ideas and connecting memories and connecting images and connecting. So you're moving so much, even if your body is not. I would say that the experience of silence, the experience of being outside of yourself, but this time for a different reason, because you're connecting all these ideas and all these images. The encounter with yourself without any other noise or requirement from the outside world. I think those elements are very, very, very linked and very present in both circumstances. So I think that would be.
That's great. I mean, one thing that I really like about book is the concept of silence. And, I tend to be more like a silent person. And I really love the guy who's here, Samuel Beckett, who wrote a lot of books about being quiet, silence. And I'm going to ask you about that later. But, this book, the protagonist is called Julia or Julia or whatever you want to call her, right now. And also, Robin, feel free to interrupt and, ask in the middle of my questions if you want to say anything. So, what is Julia escaping from? I think she's trying always to escape something. And in fact, there is this quote that I have here. It's one thing to climb. It's another to choose walls that will destroy you unless you make it to the top. And in a way, and we talked about this with Keila before, the whole idea of climbing and success and all that, it's kind of like could be seen as like cheap in a way. And I don't think Julia is doing the Zen kind of like climbing thing. So maybe you can talk about, first of all, who is Julia, and then what is she doing with her life, and what is she trying to escape if she's escaping?
Let's see, Julia. I think that Julia needs to. It would be easy to say she needs to find herself, so she goes away so she can find herself. Like that's, I mean, and in a way, yes, yeah, she goes away. She needs to make some space and with her family. She needs to be apart from her family and from her social environment, so she can kind of realize who she wants to be. That's there. She has this very oppressive mother who she loves, and they love each other, but the relationship is very tense and intense all the time. And she's very similar to her, so they are always like, how do you say, struggling with each other, and so there's that. Then she has this lover that suddenly escapes, and he escapes from her in a way. I mean, he's a rock climber as well. He has this tendency to and need to go away once in a while, or many very frequently, so he can be alone and be in silence, and that leaves her always like hanging in the emptiness of that, in terms of the relationship. So he goes away because he's trying to make space from her, because they have a very tense and aggressive and violent relationship, and he doesn't want to hurt her. He has violent tendencies, and he wants to protect her in a way. So there's that. She kind of, but no one knows what happened. No one knows where he is. He disappears, and she finds this excuse in a way for going away, for traveling, for starting this journey. She finds this excuse, like, I'm gonna go and find Rafael. So that's kind of the plot, that, like, the surface of the story. That's the reason that you would say that it's more obvious, right? I think for her, definitely getting to the top, or this idea of success, has nothing. It's completely unimportant. For her, it's important just the journey, just the experience of being on the walls and walking and traveling. She loves airports. She loves trains. She always speaks about, the experience of traveling, not only in the wild, but also in the city. When she goes to Kathmandu, and the way she describes Kathmandu is like you can tell that she really enjoys being in the city as well. When she goes to Colombia, the way for her is more maybe in Colombia more the social experience than the mountains. For me, it was important to see how, in a way, rock climbing is an excuse so you can move. You can go and find new things, new people, new experiences. And I believe that's what she needs. She needs to find new experiences, but without any type of the typical, the classical planification that a journey, that a trip would imply. When you are a rock climber, you don't have that. The only thing is, like, maybe you have a little paper that says, like, okay, I have this person lives, Bogota. So when I get there, I'm gonna call her, and I'm gonna say, hey, can I stay at your place? And then she will say yes, because she's a rock climber. She will say yes, because she's your family in a way. She's, part of your gang. She's gonna say, even if she has never seen you, because you're a friend of, this other person. So in the end, each time you travel as a rock climber, you have no idea what is gonna happen, and she needs that. So, and that's what she's looking for. She's looking for that level of openness, of that level of freedom. That is more, and it's not, again, it's like, it's so easy to think of rock climber, or even any journey as, the idea of freedom, just because you are displacing in space. But you can displace in space and be the same person when you come back. Actually, there is a moment in the novel in which she says, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you're going to travel, you have to come changed. It doesn't matter whatever it is that changes in you. Can be an injury. It doesn't matter. But you have to come back being a different person. And that's what she's looking for. All of them, I think, but especially her.
One, I see the novel as part of this tradition of expats, in a way also made me think of Paul Bowles and Jane Bowles, these marriages that travel and they fight each other and they meet other people and they're traveling all the time. And along that journey, they forget who they were and they become new people and they're like shedding new personas all over the place. And that made me think about the concept of animals. And I wanted to ask about the title. I mean, this is the story of Julia, and she's like traveling, rock climbing. Why Los Días Animales? Why the animal thing?
I believe there were two main reasons why the novel it chose that title. First of all, I believe the most transformational experience when you are outdoors in that way, moving in that way, even in a city, if you're traveling like that, you connect with this level of simplicity and emptiness that is so animal, so basic, so natural. Like you actually, I mean, you cannot travel, for example, you cannot travel with so many things on your back. I mean, you have to really choose what is important. It's not, this is not symbolic. It's not like, oh, you have to, no, you actually can't. Or you have to train a lot so you can carry more. That's the other option. Those are the options. So again, it's all so basic and her experience with the landscape and with movement is so attached to her own skin. And that to me is like the expression of nature in its highest level. So there was that. And then there was this need of her and her friends of being as naked as possible, during all these experiences, like as unprotected as possible, as but free, but not in the sense of, doing whatever comes. But yes, but besides that, it's this the level of freedom that gives you not having a mind on anything else. And that's very animal as well. So this feeling of, and this sensation of, there's nothing else. There's nothing in my head at this moment. It's actually nothing. So there was that. Maybe there were three reasons, because the last one would be, the relationship between her and Rafael. It is very intense and it is very violent, and it has very difficult. It has a few very hard and painful moments. And in that sense, that incapability of controlling themselves when together, it's also very animal. It's like it's very savage. And that's the other reason, like that relationship between them, I found it like very, very savage, very animal.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring Robin into the conversation because we're celebrating not only the book, which is in Spanish and you can find it here in the US, but also the translation. And I've been following Robin's translations. I know some of the authors she's translated, and the US tends to be a very monolingual culture most of the time. And even though in the literary market it's trying to embrace diversity, the exception so far is linguistic diversity many times. I would say the same. 41 million of people speak Spanish in this country. The US is the second largest population of Spanish speakers, but with some exceptions, one of them being those in community bookstores. When you walk into a bookstore, you don't see that reality in the stacks. What you see is something called foreign language section or something like that. This kind of like otherness. So the figure of the translator is something so important, and we're having this discussion with I mean writers, editors, translators, booksellers, about making that figure more visible with something as basic as having the translator on the cover of the book, So I just wanted to start talking about translation. And first of all, like Robin, how did you start translating this book? How did you meet Keila and all that? Because by that point, you were already like working as a translator, and this has been your career, I understand, like full-time or full-time-ish, I don't know, So yeah, all that.
Thank you so much, Alo, and just to
Yeah.
jump in and thank Mandy and Pilsen and to thank Keila and you, Alo, for the chance to join you. Yes, I don't know where to start exactly, but I live in Mexico City. I've lived there for 10 years, and I began translating more or less as I moved there. In At a point when I knew that I was interested in literature and in writing and in the Spanish language and in translating, and I still had really very little of a conception of what it would mean to have a career as a literary translator, of how viable that would be. The answer, as usual, is not very, but it like many freelance careers, it's a hodgepodge of things, and I like that. I find it a way to keep. It's a sort of, a friend talks about every book she translates as an ecosystem, and it's sort of a way to inhabit the ecosystem every time from anew, and to learn how it's put together, what grows there, what's possible to grow there, and that's a source of joy and fascination and gratitude for me all the time. I remember trying to reconstruct this with Keila the last time we were thinking together in real time about this book. I don't even remember how many years ago it was, but a number of years now, that we met through mutual friends in New York, and who had all passed through the masters that Keila has also done in creative writing in Spanish at NYU. And I've had a number of friends from different countries, mostly Mexico and Argentina, who've been in that program at various points. And I grew up in the New York area, and so in coming from Mexico and the work that I was doing mostly with Mexican poets and novelists, and then coming back to visit friends in New York and getting to know lots of new people in New York who are sort of part of this orbit of Latin American writers in New York City. And I've gotten really fascinated and thrilled to see, and I'm thinking of another writer I've translated is Cristina Rivera Garza, a Mexican writer who's lived and taught and written in the United States for a long time. And she writes a lot about the thrilling number of writers from different parts of Latin America who are writing in the US in Spanish, and how yes, some of those writers are being translated into English, which is also wonderful and important. But also, I think that there's a risk that I sometimes don't want to run as a translator in thinking about, when talking about Latin American literature in the US, is not just talking about the writers who are being translated into English, but to all the writers from different countries who are living, working, and thinking and feeling and producing their work in Spanish as well, all the time, all over the country. And so I think for me, in getting to know Keila and getting to know a few other writers at that particular point in New York, that was also a really important sort of realization of mine too, is just that there is so much. And at this point, I hadn't lived really an adult life in the US. I've been in Mexico and kind of started to build my career in Mexico. And so just getting the sense of just the vast, endless range of work being produced in Spanish in the US has been really exciting for me personally as a translator and as a reader.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's so important to have that conversation between books written in Spanish and translated into English, and then having books written in Spanish in the US, and then, having also a conversation with Latinos who write in English, like
Right.
all that kind of like ecosystem should be more connected than it is right now. But so how do you translate? Do you read the book and then you start working, or how did you do it with this one? I'm always curious about the modus operandi of every translator. So I'm sure you read the Spanish version first, or maybe you didn't. And then what called your attention of that first reading in Spanish?
Mm-hmm. I did read the book first in this case in its entirety, but as a Word document. It was actually not until Keila and I met in person, which was just before the pandemic began, that she gave me a copy of the published book in Spanish, which was so exciting. But I read it in Spanish first as a file that she sent when we began corresponding and starting to work together on this project. And I think what I remember most about my early readings of the book in Spanish, and of course it becomes a series of compulsive, never-ending readings of the book. It's just sort of one immersion after the other in both languages as it comes into existence. But was the voice of Julia and the sort of the tension, and not even so much tension, certainly not in a source as a source of conflict, but as sort of a productive, generative tension between her voice as a narrator in the sort of the bulk of the book, and her voice as a speaker in dialogue on the page with other people. And one thing that I really admire about The Animal Days is the sort of the very delicate colloquial nature of Keila's writing. And so it became, and it's something that we spoke about a lot, and that was also a real gift just throughout the process of getting to be in direct contact with Keila all the time and to have her input as well as the translation progressed. But of, Julia, when she speaks, is a person of a sort of very spare register. She doesn't use a lot of very ornate words. She doesn't beat around the bush. There's something extremely direct about the way that she expresses herself with others. And her group of friends also, and with Rafael as well, there's the sense of them sharing kind of a shorthand is the feeling that I got, a sort of, not even just in the sense of slang, but just they're from the same place. They're obsessed with the same thing. They go together to the same places. They have these nicknames for each other, for their gear, they have a sort of understanding about the sequence of things in this sort of animalistic way, as you were discussing, like a sense of what's permitted and what isn't permitted among them, how they're allowed to be as bodies, as people. And so I think as a translator, it felt very important to protect the sort of tautness of that language and not to sort of overburden it with language that felt sort of overly cerebral or overly, mostly that sort of, I needed to kind of boil it down a lot of the time. And that felt, and I think that's certainly something that talking with Keila was very important to that. Revising, I think the tendency also when I approach a translation, an entire book, is to have a very, very loose first draft. There's a kind of gestural feeling to the first draft. It's sort of letting myself because it feels very different to me to sit down and read a book and then to be translating it. And I think my sort of background as a writer and as a reader is in poetry. And so to sort of let the physicality of the language itself sort of show you what it's made of, and how the sentences are structured, how they need to be moving. And so I kind of allow myself a very sort of intuitive first draft, and then things get much more obsessive and sort of clinical as I revise. And so I think a lot of what I did in revising and a lot of what Keila and I talked about together was to find ways to pare it down, is to sort of cut out loose language in a way that feels very much like poetry to me.
And I'm glad you used the word protecting. You were protecting something of the original, of the source. Because I'm going to ask you the opposite, actually, what you betray from the original source. And I want to know, what were some of the elements, or what were some of the sections in which you surrender to the old saying, traduttore traitore, like translator is a traitor, no? And I know you're not betraying Keila, but, part of being a translator is that sometimes
should I leave the room?
Rewrite. It's a very important part of being a writer, Keila. Yeah. So yeah, I want to know, some of those moments, because, translating is also, that's why it's so important to have the name of the translator on the book, because it's not a Google translator is not doing it. It's a person doing it and taking decisions and all that. So I want to hear about some of those elements in which you think that was hard, but we thought about this solution or that, and how you solve, local words of play, for example, how you play and all that. Yeah.
That actually, what you just said, is something that I think about a lot in my work in general, and that definitely came up in The Animal Days. It's a book that ranges all over the place. In, you know, geographically, it's everywhere. There are parts of the book that take place in Venezuela, parts that take place in the U.S., parts that take place in Kathmandu, and elsewhere. And yet, the core group, the main character and her core group, are from Venezuela, and so their speech is certainly full of words that are specific to Venezuela, to specific kinds of slang, to words for food, to words for places. And I think that it's very important to me to protect that too, you know, and to not sort of make it kind of generically identifiable to an English language audience. And I think in this sense, it seems to me that lots of Latin American readers are more familiar with sort of running into English or to other languages in literature written in Spanish, and I think that's still less common in a very sort of fundamentally monolingual country, or monolingual sort of minded country. In the publishing world. And so, and I think my own thinking on this has changed since Keila and I started working together. I remember in an early version of the translation, and this is now something that I sort of feel is a betrayal and I have stopped doing, it was sort of, I was taught, you know, to italicize words in Spanish, you know, sort of, this is from another language, you know, and so something like bocadillo, or the name of a flower, you know, that was all italicized, and it wasn't, and since we've been, you know, I translated the book for the first time a number of years ago, and it was when we were working together and revising and getting it ready with Katakana, with the wonderful press, that it just suddenly kind of stood out to me that, you know, that I had stopped doing that in other translations. I think it's important also for the sort of the fluidity of a multilingual narrator, of a multilingual context, for that to be honored. And so we took the italics out. But I think that was you know, a moment when, and I think that there are probably other times I'd have to think about sort of specific moments, but where the specificity of a local reference may have been lost in a way that I wish it hadn't been, you know. And so I think that's an ongoing conversation. It's a constant sort of evaluation of sort of, will this particular reference or word, you know, if it's a nickname for someone, if it's a joke, you know, that sort of makes more sense in Spanish than it does in English, how to express these things in a way that does feel like the reader in English is being, in a way that a poem shows you how to read it. It's being sort of shown like, this is a joke, you know, this is a reference, but it's okay if you don't understand every you know, it's every part of it. And yet I think also the goal is never to distract in a way that takes away from the rest of the book. You know, there's a sense of, you know, how can I honor not only this image or this joke, but how can I also honor the passage that it's part of? How can I sort of continue to respect the sequence, to the intention of the author? And I'm sure that there are places where that was more successful than others, because that's also the nature of things. And I think a lot about something that the translator and poet Raquel Salas Rivera, a Puerto Rican poet and translator, has said, that, you know, there's this obsession sort of with what is lost or what is betrayed in translation. But Raquel says that he thinks of it as, you know, we know that all loss implies change, that all loss fundamentally is transformation. And would it not be more helpful to us all as readers, as translators, as writers, to think about not sort of what has been lost in this kind of backstabbing, you know, but what, by the nature of using language and being people speaking to each other and trying to express ourselves in different contexts, is necessarily transformed.
I would like to say something regarding that, Ado. You know, it was so. First of all, I have to say that working with Robin has been such a wonderful experience, and I only want her to translate. I mean, we work together in all of my projects, and it's been like a wonderful, beautiful experience, because we actually bounce ideas back and forth many times as necessary. And even in the moments, I mean, there were these particular moments in which there was these like nuances or expressions that were like maybe Venezuelan, or maybe just like, you know, a very rock climbing, yes, and wouldn't make sense in other, you know, in English, unless we both researched like, how would I say this in English, for example, because then I ended up like also doing a little research so I could understand how would I say whatever I say in Spanish as a rock climber in English, so she could understand what Julia is saying. And those, triangulations were like amazing. I feel that it was so creative and so fluid. Like, so I really appreciate Robin's flexibility and the way, and actually I felt like it was in such a good hands that when there was this need to change something, this joke, makes more sense in English in this other way. And then, it's so interesting when you see that sense of humor is like such a big deal. And actually, you cannot translate a joke. You cannot translate a joke. It's most of the time. So you have to, find whatever joke makes sense in English so Julia can say what she wants to say. Otherwise, we would be betraying her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting as well. You have to change something so your characters actually say what you want them to say. And when I read The Animal Days, like the first definitive version, I almost cried, like just seeing Julia speaking English, like if she was speaking Spanish. I don't know how to say it. Like there wasn't conflict at all, and there isn't. Like Julia speaks English the same way she speaks Spanish, and that's like such a treat.
Well,
so lovely to hear.
Maybe we can hear both the original source and then the translation. So maybe Keila, you wanna read in Spanish from the book, and maybe you can tell everyone who is joining us from which part of the book you're gonna read, and so on.
Since I think we're gonna read like 3 fragments from different moments. Would you like us to read each fragment in Spanish and English, or all in Spanish and then all in English?
Whatever you want to do. You're the author, and whatever Robin too thinks.
Keila, I'm wondering, given time, and since we have spoken some about the book and how it begins, maybe we could do the two.
The second? Okay. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, perfect. So let's do this one first. So this is from chapter. I was going to start speaking Spanish because I have the bookings. Oh, this is Los Días Animales. So chapter 4. She's describing what kind of relationship she has with Rafael, and from the perspective of a rock climber, obviously. I mean, regarding that point of view. Estuvimos desnudos en lugares en los que no imaginas que haya seres humanos, en barrancos, sobre rocas asomadas al borde de precipicios, en cuevas sin luz, bajo tierra, dentro del mar, y en tiendas de montaña, rodeados de hielo y de ventiscas que amenazaban con arrancarnos de la nieve de un tajo. En caminos solitarios, alertas a cualquier ruido por si se acercaba algo o alguien. Para nosotros era inútil la división entre espacio privado y espacio público, entre colchón y piedra rugosa. Estuvimos en lugares donde lo único que había, además de nosotros dos y alguna hormiga, era un precipicio. Mi vida dependía de Rafael y de lo que él decidiera hacer con la suya. Y al revés, yo lo tenía en mis manos. Eso es cosa normal, parte del negocio entre escaladores. Pero que tu existencia física dependa de la persona que además te ve desnuda y sabe cuán frágil es tu piel, es algo bien primitivo. Con cada embestida, quien produce y mira tu expresión de placer está mirando también el precipicio. Es también tu precipicio. Estás a milímetros de un borde, con un cuerpo encima que puede borrarte, al que puedes desaparecer. Pero mis amigos eran también los suyos y lo querían. Decían que sacabas lo del alcohol. Rafael era el compañero de escalada más seguro que podías tener. Lo que nuestros amigos decían se convirtió en un punto sólido a favor de las historias violentas que circundaban como moscas al Rafael. Pero también declaraba en su defensa el día en que decidí confiar. Si sacas aquello, es el compañero más seguro que puedas tener, me decían.
Gracias, Keila. Here's the same passage in English. We were naked in places you can't picture humans even existing, on cliffs, on rocks jutting out into gorges. in lightless caves, underground, in the sea, and in tents on slopes surrounded by ice, enveloped in blizzards that threaten to yank us out of the snow with a single jolt. On deserted paths, attentive to any sound that might signal the approach of someone or something. The division between public and private space, between mattress and craggy rock, was useless to us. We were in places where the only thing present apart from the two of us and the occasional ant was an abyss. My life depended on Rafael and on whatever he decided to do with his own, and the other way around. I held him in my hands. This is normal, just part of the deal between climbers. But to have your physical existence depend on the person who sees you naked and knows the fragility of your skin, it's a primitive thing. With every onslaught of desire, the person who causes you pleasure and watches your expression seized with it is also looking into the abyss. He is your abyss too. You're mere millimeters from the edge, with a body on top of you that could erase you entirely, a body you could make disappear. But my friends were his friends, and they loved him. They said that if you forgot about the drinking for a minute, Rafael was the best climbing partner you could possibly have. What our friends said became a solid point in favor of the violent stories that circled Rafael like flies, but it also defended his case when I decided to trust him. If you forget about all that, he's the best partner you could have, they told me.
And
Yeah, that
I
was
can
so good. Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's so interesting to hear, same book in two different languages, in two different voices, because it really makes literature this communal experience and not this experience that is based on one person. And I mean, there's obviously so much written about killing the author and about that, but, like making storytelling more like a communal thing. So, yeah, do you want to read more, Keila?
Yeah, I can read a little passage from chapter 7. Capítulo 7. No sabes qué harías frente a una pared de 1000 metros hasta que te la ganas. No llegas donde has llegado de un día para otro. Hay que camellarse el camino. Entonces te miras de frente, sin espejo y sin nadie que opine. Cuando estás al frente al basurero es que sabes si vas a terminar comiendo de los basureros. Cuando te ofrecen el trabajo es que sabes si vas a terminar pasando papelitos de LCD dentro de un cuaderno en una aduana. Cuando el novio de tu mejor amiga te echa los perros es que sabes si eres capaz de acostarte con el novio de tu mejor amiga. Cuando tienes un título en la mano es que sabes si vas a terminar viviendo desvelada entre 4 paredes para subir de escalafón a punta de artículos y congresos después de un PhD. Lo demás es paja, pura palabra. Las personas comprimen, obligan, restringen. Las palabras confunden. No sabes quién serías hasta que no sales del ecosistema que te obliga a ser de una manera o de otra. No sabes de qué eres capaz hasta que no estás ahí. Con el mosquetón en la mano, soltándote el arnés. Un día te descubres escalando sin cuerda. Es un paso, no hace falta planearlo. Es un momento. Decides desamarrarte y montar un pie, sostener de una mano, comenzar a subir. 2 metros más, 3. Es fácil. Cuando comienzas ni miras hacia abajo. Un instante estás acá, al siguiente estás en un limbo que solo puede terminar en el tope. A media pared no te puedes quedar. Misma cosa. No sabes qué harías ante una cinta elástica en un precipicio hasta que te ves allí. Un instante estás frente al precipicio y al siguiente estás subiendo al pie de la cinta. Te alejas y caminas sobre una línea. No puedes arrepentirte ni quedarte para siempre en el vacío. A veces el principio se antepone. Un golpe en la columna y listo. En silla de ruedas o con muletas para siempre. ¿Y qué eres sin cuerpo? ¿Qué eres sin mente? Eso va junto. No hay pendejada New Age que valga que no somos este cuerpo. Claro que somos el cuerpo. Eso va junto. Eso es todo. Hay que andar pilas.
You can't know what you'll do when faced with a 1,000-meter wall until you beat it. And you don't get where you've gotten overnight. It's a slog. Then you look yourself in the eye. No mirror, no one passing judgment. When you're standing in front of a dumpster, that's when you'll find out whether you'll end up eating out of it. When you're offered the job, that's when you'll find out whether you'll end up smuggling tabs of LSD through customs in a notebook. When your best friend's boyfriend hits on you, that's when you find out whether you're capable of sleeping with your best friend's boyfriend. When you have a diploma in your hand, that's when you find out whether you'll end up spending sleepless nights surrounded by four walls, scaling the pyramid of articles and conferences after you get your PhD. The rest is bullshit, all talk. People compress, oblige, restrict. Words are confusing. You don't know who you're going to be until you get out of the ecosystem that makes you be one thing or another. You don't know what you're capable of until you're not there anymore, carabiner in hand, strapped into the harness. One day you find yourself climbing ropeless. It's a step. No need to plan it. It's a moment. You decide to unstrap yourself and place one foot, grip with one hand, and you start to climb. 2 more meters. 3. It's easy. When you start out, you don't even look down. One instant you're here, the next you're in a limbo that can only end at the top. You can't stay halfway up that wall. It's the same thing. You don't know what you'll do with the tightrope on the edge of a precipice until you find yourself there. One instant you're facing the chasm, the next you're lifting your foot onto the rope. You step away from the edge and start walking into the air. You can't just change your mind or stay in the void forever. Sometimes the abyss intimidates you. One blow to the spine, and that's it. You're in a wheelchair or on crutches for the rest of your life. And what are you without a body? What are you without a mind? These risks are part of the deal. No new age bullshit is worth it in the end. We're not our bodies, blah, blah, blah. Of course we're our bodies. It's part of the deal, that's all. You have to watch out.
Good. Thank you for that. I think if people that are watching this, they have a question, I think they can write that on the YouTube chat. And I have a couple of more questions. And also, if you have a question too, or if you want to say something, more than welcome. Well, I wanted to, I was really curious about climate culture after reading this book. Like, it's such a weird tribe of people. What's going on? And also, I know, Keila, you are part of that. And, I say that as a writer, which is already something like, it's a weird tribe of people. But I'm like, these people are like beyond that, because it's not a sport, but it involves physicality. It's animal, it's human, and they're like moving. So can you please talk about this tribe of people?
Let's see. I would say there is a lot of kindness in rock climbers. The way, in general, obviously we're all humans and anything can happen. And Julia could tell us, right? She has her own experiences that are very hard and that involve, the rock climbing community. But I would say that in general, rock climbers are a family. There is like this sense of community is very, very tight, very, very close. And I would say that when you are, as a passage we just read, when you are sharing, when you share with other people, regardless if it's your lover, your friend, woman, a man, whatever, younger, older than you, but when you share with a group of people these experiences that are extreme, that are dangerous, potentially dangerous, but at the same time that are so basic, as we mentioned before. And when you share these moments of silence, when you share hunger, when you share, being cold, being wet, you are walking for hours and then you're wet and everybody's wet and everybody's cold and nobody talks because everybody wants to just get wherever they are going. And, sharing that with a group of people, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. So there is this level of kindness and empathy and compassion towards the other person because everybody has been hungry and wet and upset and everybody has cried on the wall and everybody has wanted to go back home and it's not possible because you're halfway, and everybody has passed through all those experiences, and the experiences are so hard that are not, you don't forget about them. Like you have them, you're very, very clear that they are very latent, they are like very alive, even if you are not experiencing them yourself in your body, right? So I think that is big, that is huge. As humans, having this possibility to share this level of compassion and communication is very, very powerful and beautiful. At the same time, these people are pretty disattached. They just want to go wherever they are going. So they really, at the same time, they can leave you behind. They can leave you behind. They're not going to leave you to die, but they're not going to wait there because you're tired. You're going to have to walk on your own maybe for 2 hours or 5 hours, just following a path. And they will know that because you're going to follow the path, you're not going to get lost. But you have to be patient and you have to trust. So there is a lot of trusting, a lot of independence. As I said, like everybody's there because they have their own issues, they have their own plan, they have their own projects. And that's very strong. Not necessarily involve the fact, the idea of getting to the top or, earning, this prize, getting to the top, but a project of becoming whatever they want to become. So it's like that goes first. So that balance is kind of intense and hard to process.
Well, we have a question, and it's, where are you working right now? What's coming up? Where are you writing, Keila? And where are you translating and writing, Robin?
Right now, this year I finished my second novel and my second poetry book. The novel is called Minerva, and still unpublished. It's I think Minerva would be a good friend of Julia's, even if she doesn't do anything similar. She's very close to the experience of the body. But she's the daughter of a non-traditional family with 2 fathers and a mother in Venezuela. And the story begins when she's very young, and it's it's fragmented. She remembers different moments in which, and through her memories, you start realizing how it is and how it was for her to live with this family that is so particular. It's a story of love, a family love. Her family is amazing. They are like designers and photographers, and it's a very interesting crowd in which she lives and grows up. But eventually it happens in the even if it's not a political novel, the political situation in Venezuela is in the background. So eventually she has to travel, and she becomes an immigrant in the U.S. And when doing, and she's a dancer. She's a dancer since she was little, and when she travels, she starts modeling for artists. So she has this balance between movement and how do you say, immobility, not moving. So she's between those both. So that's her story. Yeah. Robin, I need you. Well, she's between both. Yeah? She's a dancer, but she also poses, and there is a reflection between both experiences that, in a way, is similar to Julia's experience as a climber. But this is, I mean, she's a completely different human, and her family is completely different. It's a yeah. So that's a novel I just finished, and I'm very excited about. And right now I'm working on 2 new novels, and one is like a more intimate and minimal story about a woman as well. And the other one is about a couple of punk rockers in Venezuela in the 90s, and how, because I have this feeling that the rock movement in the 90s in Venezuela has a lot to say regarding our political situation, current political situation. So it's not political literal. It's not about the political situation in Venezuela, but it is about how music and how the experience of this wild couple in the city in a way or the other talks about social climate and about a political climate. So it's like it could happen anywhere, but in this case it's in Venezuela, but it could happen anywhere. And it's more about music and the way these two lovers, punk rockers, kind of make peace with life if they can. So that's the story. That's what I'm working on now.
Great. How about you, Robin?
I'm working on a few things at the moment, but just to highlight one because it's very much on my mind because I'm handing it in tomorrow. Is a novel called Salt Crystals by a Colombian writer named Cristina Bendek. It's her first novel, and the main character and the author herself are from the island of San Andres off the coast of Colombia. And it's an amazing sort of multilingual book. It's written mostly in Spanish, but on this island are spoken English, Spanish, and a form of Creole, which is specific to San Andres. And it's about the narrator returning to the island after a long time living elsewhere and coming to grips both with her own family history there and also just the sort of many legacies of colonialism in the place that she comes from. It's really a beautiful, sort of rich, dense novel that I've felt very immersed in for a number of months. So very, very final revisions now.
Well, I wanted to thank you both, Keila and Robin, and Animal Days. It's here, and I'm gonna pass it to Mandy.
Yeah, thank you, Keila, Robin, and Otto, for joining us here tonight and for sharing this beautiful book with us. I hope that one day, Keila, you and Robin will be able to come to the store and see the book on the table in person. But until then, it's been very lovely to share this virtual space with you. I want to remind everyone you can pick up the book in store on our website, or in the store or on our website, or wherever fine books are sold. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Thank you.